You're listening to the N2K Space Network.
And now, a word from our sponsor, ThreatLocker, the powerful zero-trust enterprise solution that stops ransomware in its tracks. Allow Listing is a deny-by-default software that makes application control simple and fast. Ring fencing is an application containment strategy, ensuring apps can only access the files, registry keys, network resources, and other applications they truly need to function. Shut out cybercriminals with world-class endpoint protection from ThreatLocker.
Today is Indigenous Peoples Day, an official city and state holiday in various locations in the United States that celebrates and honors Indigenous American peoples, also referred to as Native Americans, and commemorates their histories and their cultures. So, who was the first Indigenous American to fly to space? Let's find out. This is T-Minus Deep Space. I'm Maria Varmazes. John Herrington is a member of the Chickasaw Nation and holds the honor of being the first enrolled member of a Native American tribe to fly in space. He is a retired U.S. Naval aviator and a test pilot, and a retired NASA astronaut. Herrington was selected as a mission specialist for STS-113 and flew to the International Space Station on November 23, 2002.
Hi, my name is John Herrington. I'm a retired NASA astronaut, former naval aviator and test pilot, and I'm a proud citizen of the Chickasaw Nation in central Oklahoma.
Thank you so much, John, for joining me. You have a really fascinating story, and we're just going to start at the beginning. I'm someone who struggled a lot with college, so when I was reading your bio, I related very strongly, and I would love if, I'm sure you've told the story a zillion times, but could you indulge me a bit about how rock climbing got you out of school and then back into it, essentially?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, we don't all start school with this notion of being something in life, right? And I liked being outdoors. I lived in Colorado at the time. And so I decided I wanted to be a forest ranger. I wanted to work outside. I did not want to work behind a desk. And I spent most of my time outside during my first year of college. I worked in a restaurant. Actually, I was working full time at a restaurant in Colorado Springs. And I was out at a place called Garden of the Gods one day with my textbooks. I was going to study, right? Ended up meeting two guys who were climbing, and they asked me if I wanted to learn how. And I said I would love to. And so I did. I started doing that, and I found more interest in rock climbing than I did in sitting in class. I went to class, but I didn't really study. I didn't have the motivation to do it. Ended up having a whopping 1.72 grade point by the end of my second semester. And since I was working full-time and going to school part-time, I actually got suspended right away. They don't put you on probation. They don't say, hey, think about it. They just suspend you. And so I found myself out of school, second semester freshman.
That's a good start, right?
Yeah, well, I don't know. Good is how you look at it. But the fact that I was a rock climber and I worked with a guy in the restaurant who was also a rock climber, roundabout kind of way, my restaurant sent me to Texas. I worked in Fort Worth, Texas for a few months in the summer, and I hated it. Not Fort Worth. I just hated, the job was terrible. And I called my friend, and he said, I've got a job for you. And I said, doing what? And he said, rock climbing. And I, oh, really? So I've learned more about it. And I called my dad and I said, hey, I've got this great opportunity to get a job rock climbing in Colorado. He said, good, don't quit. You got a good job, don't quit. Well, that was on a Thursday. I think I quit on Friday. By Monday morning, I was in Glenwood Springs, Colorado with my Volkswagen Carmen Ghia, starting to work on a survey crew on Interstate 70 in Glenwood Canyon.
And then So, and then that ignited the passion. I was reading this in your bio, so I'm giving the sort of very summarized version, but that sort of reignited a passion in STEM on your own and sort of brought you back into college in its own way.
Well, it's the first time in my life where I saw math in practice. Math wasn't on a textbook. Math was on a highway, hanging off of a cliff, working with guys who used these really unique instruments that would measure distances using a beam of light. And so I started asking questions, and I was lucky the guy I worked for convinced me if I wanted to make something of myself, I'd better go back to school and become an engineer and not accept being the lowest person on the crew.
Smart, smart. So basically, what my obvious question is, what happened next after that?
Wow, I went back. Well, actually, he encouraged me to go back to school, so I reapplied to the university, and bless her heart, they let me back in. My grades hadn't changed. I think I'd personally changed. I went back in now with a motivation to study, something I thought I saw a purpose in. And I was very lucky that I had a great circle of friends I made in the engineering department. We really worked well together. I learned this idea of collaborative learning. It wasn't just me. It was working with other people and being able to solve problems, not on your own, but working with others. So you have this interest and you have motivation and you have a circle of friends. And that made it much easier. I mean, it's still hard. You still have to do the calculus, you got to do the physics and all that. But considering I didn't do well my first semester, not taking these type of classes, I did much better, brought my grade point up to a 3.2. And by the time I was a senior, I worked for the mathematics department. I was a tutor and grader for an instructor named Nancy Baggs. Nancy was a calculus instructor. And bless her heart, I was her grader, and she would give me a stack of papers to grade. And then sometimes when she couldn't do a class, I would get to tutor the class and be a proctor. That was kind of cool. But I was given a student to tutor who was a retired Navy captain who flew Dauntless dive bombers in World War II. He became my Navy tutor. I was his calculus tutor. And so he encouraged me to join the Navy. I did that in 1983.
Oh, that's excellent. And you have a very distinguished naval career. Really quite a remarkable number of achievements there. And then that also then springboarded you later into a NASA career, which is phenomenal. I was listening to an interview you did a few years ago, and something you said I thought was very striking about your experience in space and also flying as an astronaut changed your perspective on working with people in other countries. I thought that was a really, could you expand on that a little bit, please? That was fantastic.
Well, I'm a naval aviator, right? My job was to hunt Russian submarines. That was my job. I did that for 4 years, in the Western Northern Pacific, and I hunted Russians. Hey, they were our enemy, right? Cold War. And by the time I became an astronaut, I was working with Russians. I was living in Russia. I lived in Moscow. I lived in Star City. 2 of my crewmates I was going to fly in the space station with were cosmonauts, Russian military officers. That guy was a flight doc. But I'm working with the people that my entire professional career as an aviator, I was told to fear. I was told they were the enemy. And the reality is they're not. The political system is different. We know it's going on full force right now. But in terms of the cosmonauts and the astronauts, that wasn't our job. Our job was to work together to do mission and to do it safely. I took a Russian to space on the space shuttle, and we brought 2 Russians home. So very, very strange and a wonderful experience from what I was trained to do early on.
We'll be right back.
What's your 2 a.m. security worry? Is it, do I have the right controls in place? Maybe, are my vendors secure? Or the one that really keeps you up at night, how do I get out from under these old tools and manual processes? That's where Vanta comes in. Vanta automates the manual work so you can stop sweating over spreadsheets, chasing audit evidence, and filling out endless questionnaires. Their trust management platform continuously monitors your systems, centralizes your data, and simplifies your security at scale. And it fits right into your workflows, using AI to streamline evidence collection, flag risks, and keep your program audit ready, all the time. With Vanta, you get everything you need to move faster, scale confidently, and finally, get back to sleep. Get started at vanta.com/cyber. That's VANTA.com/cyber. At Thales, they know cybersecurity can be tough and you can't protect everything. But with Thales, you can secure what matters most. With Thales's industry-leading platforms, you can protect critical applications, data, and identities, anywhere and at scale with the highest ROI. That's why the most trusted brands and largest banks, retailers, and healthcare companies in the world rely on Thales to protect what matters most: applications, data, and identity. That's Thales. THALES. Learn more at thalesgroup.com/cyber.
That's fantastic. There's so much to learn from that as well, and even in these challenging times, it's a really wonderful thing to be reminded of. I have so many questions. I'm gonna be jumping around a little bit. I know you have been very busy since you retired from the Navy and from NASA. You've been. I'm a cyclist, so I heard about your trip across the country, and I was like, that's amazing. I did my first century last year, and I said, wow, but what you did is absolutely phenomenal. So just kudos to you on that. Which sounds weird saying that to an astronaut, but seriously, kudos. I would love to hear about what you've been doing in terms of mentorship with young people, especially with people encouraging young Indigenous students into STEM careers. I imagine that's a lot of what you're doing now. I'd love to hear a little bit about maybe what you share with the students and what you're hearing back from them.
Well, one of the very first speaking engagements I had as an astronaut, if we all get these requests to speak and everything, and given the fact that my heritage is, Native American, I found myself in a role that I didn't expect to be in. I was a role model to kids that never had one before. And so my very first speaking engagement was to the American Indian Science and Engineering Society in the George R. Brown Convention Center in Houston, Texas. 3,000 of my closest friends, right? I was scared to death, to walk into this huge audience of Native people and to tell my story. And my story resonated. I mean, I was talking to my brothers, my sisters, my aunties, my uncles, It was an incredible experience where I got really deeply involved now in this notion of, promoting STEM education and the idea that what was my background? How did I overcome some challenges, and, who helped me along the way? And now I had this opportunity to to be in that place where I could work with others. And hopefully if they could see what I did, they could see it in themselves. Not necessarily to be an astronaut, but to be successful, to overcome some really difficult subject matter and then to, find a career that you're passionate about. And so I was on the board for ACES twice. By the time I retired, I worked in the commercial space world for a couple of years, and unfortunately, I hitched my horse to the wrong wagon. And ended up, hopping on a bicycle and doing what? Talking to Native kids across the country, different reservations and NASA schools about my career as an astronaut, and hopefully I would inspire them. And every day I wrote a blog, and every blog had a math or science problem in it. And the idea was that I want students, it had to be something as simple as, for say first graders. John's going from, this town to this town. How far is it? Well, look at a map, Well, if he did it in 5 hours and it's 30 miles, how fast did he pedal? So you start getting the math in it and the circumference of a wheel, blah, blah, blah. The idea is that I wanted kids to be engaged, that math can be fun, math can be interesting, as long as if you have a purpose behind it, that type of thing. And you can see it, visualize it. So I was able to talk to kids, and matter of fact, I gave a talk once in Durango, Colorado, at Fort Lewis College to a group of Native Navajo kids during a NASA or a summer program. And, years later, I'm on an elevator in Phoenix, and this young lady walks up to me. She says, "You're John Herrington." I'm like, nobody does that, right? Yeah, am I? I think I am. But, it doesn't happen to me. I'm not, I'm not Brad Pitt, right? So this young lady said, "I met you when I was 11 years old at a summer camp in Fort Lewis College, and I didn't realize I could be an engineer until I met you." And she says, "I want to thank you. And I'm now a civil engineer with the city of San Francisco, I believe. And I want to thank you for doing that." She got a big hug, took a selfie, and you don't realize that you can have an impact on somebody's life without any knowledge, you're just doing what you do. And I find that's a very gratifying thing. I did that to the people that encouraged me to go back to school. I called the guy that actually encouraged me to go back to school, that owned the company. I called him and I thanked him, for his encouragement. He was probably in his late 80s or 90s when I did that. That's great, John. Good to hear. Good for you, But, I think it's, you be thankful to the people that encourage you to do things, and be thankful that you listen. Very important.
Absolutely. And I've often said in conversations with friends about how you can see the world best on a bike. You've got the most unique perspective. You've done a lot of the world on the bike, but then you went to space. You saw it from space.
Well, I worked in space. I was in space for 2 weeks. I lived underwater for 10 days in the Florida Keys. in a thing called NEMO, NASA Extreme Environment Mission Operations. And then I rode a bike across the country. The first was space, second was underwater, third was a bike. And I saw the world from three different beautiful perspectives. The macro perspective of seeing it in this grandiose, beautiful, moving out of the atmosphere overview. They call it the overview effect, how it fundamentally changes you. I lived underwater. I saw little Creole shrimp in the porthole and fish going, big grouper. Go outside to dive. There's a big grouper. It's a big manta ray coming at you. Yeah, it's incredible. And then I got to ride across the country, and I met people. I met a Korean veteran. I met people that just sitting on a porch in Arkansas, just wanted to just shoot the breeze. Pedaling through 100-degree temperatures and hearing the sprinkler system and how cool it was. We're very fortunate to live on this beautiful planet. I've seen it from three different perspectives, and I will appreciate every one of those for the rest of my life.
That's so beautiful. I was so curious what you thought about that, and you answered it before I could ask. So I cannot imagine a more unique perspective than that. Especially, I know that you've done a lot of work. I was looking at Into Nature's Wild, the trailer for that. I know you've done a lot of work on sharing the beauty of our planet with the next generation. It's so important. I know we're coming up on the end of our time, so I just wanted to ask what advice you would give to our listeners, many of whom are working in commercial space, but many of whom are also trying to mentor the next generation, as this is something you do a lot of. I'm very curious what you would share with them in terms of how to encourage the next.
Yeah, I just think, what you do, you're passionate about. I love my job at NASA. I thought it was the greatest experience I ever had. Being able to, both work on the vehicle, launch people into space, recover when they come home, doing a spacewalk and hanging on by a thumb and a forefinger at the end of the space station. And, they're all fabulous things, but I think it's most important. And one of the astronauts told us this early on. He said, in the history of the world, we'd be 108 billion people have lived on this planet. Okay. As of today, I think it's 600 something or so have had the privilege of flying in space. And he said, don't forget how fortunate you are to do something so very few people have ever done. And it behooves you to share that story with others. So I think anything that if you love something and you love it with a passion, you love the job you do, share that passion with kids that may not, understand what you do. I've always told people, if there's something you want to do, go meet somebody doing it and talk to them. Don't just assume you think you know what it's going to be. I assumed I'd be a forest ranger. I'd never talked to a forest ranger. I joined the Navy because I tutored and met a gentleman who encouraged me to do something exciting, who had done it for his career. And when you can make that connection with somebody, that hopefully they'll go down a path that they'll get paid to do something they love to do. I think, gosh, that's what we all aspire to, right? No matter flying in space or being an engineer, being an author, those type of things. Do something, get paid to do something you love to do. Everybody has challenges in their life, right? I got kicked out of school early on, figured it out, got back in. Got married, worked a really hard job, got divorced, unfortunately, is when I was at NASA. It's a tough job. Found another woman that I got married to on my bike ride, who unfortunately passed away from cancer. And I just got remarried again this summer to a remarkable woman. I'm right now, thank you very much. Life has really a lot of challenges. And just because you do something that's fascinating and fun, and there's a day that's going to come to an end, and how else do you surround that? What you do is with fun. So I'm very fortunate. I've had some challenges like everybody, all of us do. How do you overcome those challenges and move on and make the most of your life?
Very wise words. Thank you so much for sharing that with me and telling me your story. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining me today, John.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
And that's T-Minus Deep Space, brought to you by N2K Cyberwire. We'd love to know what you think of our podcast. Your feedback ensures we deliver the insights that keep you a step ahead in the rapidly changing space industry. If you like our show, please share a rating and review in your podcast app, or you can send an email to space@n2k.com. We're proud that N2K Cyberwire is part of the daily routine of the most influential leaders and operators in the public and private sector, from the Fortune 500 to many of the world's preeminent intelligence and law enforcement agencies. N2K helps space and cybersecurity professionals grow, learn, and stay informed. As the nexus for discovery and connection, we bring you, the people, the technology, and the ideas shaping the future of secure innovation. Learn how at n2k.com. N2K's senior producer is Alice Carruth. Our producer is Liz Stokes. We're mixed by Elliot Peltzman and Trey Hester, with original music by Elliot Peltzman. Our executive producer is Jennifer Iben. Peter Kilpie is our publisher, and I'm your host, Maria Varmazes. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.
Every minute your finance team spends wrestling with data is a minute lost. Insight Software's AI-powered insights instantly move you from complexity to clarity. Automated analysis, real-time reporting, strategic recommendations, all at your fingertips. Transform how your finance team works and watch your business grow. Stop wasting time. Start making smarter decisions. Learn more at insightsoftware.com/AI.